The war was a lie, but only humanity knew. HFY Sci-Fi Stories. In the year 2227, the galaxy had united under a fragile peace, orchestrated by the Coalition of Advanced Species, CAS. Humanity, once a backwater species on a barely noticed planet, had risen to prominence as the driving force behind this interstellar alliance. But there was a dark secret at the heart of the galaxy's newfound harmony, a secret known only to humans. The war had been a lie. Humanity had been part of a massive galactic conspiracy to deceive the rest of the universe. For years, the CAS had pushed a narrative that humanity was an aggressive, expansionist species, one whose unchecked ambition had triggered a war with the ancient and powerful Zarkovians. The Zarkovians, massive, highly intelligent beings, had been presented as the tragic victims of humanity's uncontrollable aggression. But the truth was far darker. The war had never been a war at all. Humanity had never attacked the Zarkovians. It had all started with a single human diplomat, Ambassador Alara Wright, who had uncovered a chilling truth during a routine visit to the Zarkovian homeworld. The Zarkovians had a deep-seated fear. They feared humanity's potential to outgrow them. For centuries, the Zarkovians had maintained dominance over the galaxy, manipulating species and alliances to ensure their supremacy. But humanity, with its rapid technological growth and unyielding spirit, posed a direct challenge to that control. Alara discovered that the Zarkovians had engineered a series of small skirmishes, using misinformation to provoke humanity into conflict. They knew that if they could make humanity appear as the aggressor, they could rally the other species of the galaxy to their side, isolate humanity, and ensure their dominance for millennia to come. When Alara reported her findings, the coalition was divided. Some factions wanted to expose the Zarkovians, but many believed that humanity's position in the galaxy was too precarious. If the truth came out, it would mean war, an outright war against the Zarkovians, who had allies scattered across the galaxy. The leaders of the human government, however, made a different decision. They would keep the truth hidden, but they would also take action. They created a plan to allow humanity to play the role of the villain, assuming the mantle of aggressors in the war. To secure peace for the rest of the galaxy, humanity would absorb the hatred, the scorn, and the blame, all while working behind the scenes to subtly weaken the Zarkovian hold on the galaxy. In essence, humanity would become the galaxy's scapegoat. The plan worked. The rest of the galaxy rallied behind the CAS, believing that they were fighting a righteous war against humanity's malevolent intentions. The Zarkovians, in turn, consolidated their power. But humanity grew stronger. They secretly developed new technologies, not just for their own benefit, but to undermine the Zarkovians' hold over the galaxy. For years, the truth remained hidden. Humanity played the part of the villain, battling both the Zarkovians and the other species who believed the lies. But there was a deep cost. Humanity's soldiers became legends, warriors who fought bravely against overwhelming odds. But who knew the truth? They were not the aggressors. They were fighting to free the galaxy from a deceitful empire, and every victory they achieved was a victory against the lies that kept them trapped. The war raged on, but the humans had something no other species could match, an unshakable will. They were fighters, not because they were forced to be, but because they believed in a future where the galaxy could be free of the lies the Zarkovians had woven. Each battle, each victory, was not for glory or vengeance, but for truth. In the final stages of the war, humanity made a decisive move. They launched a covert operation to infiltrate the Zarkovian Central Command, bringing the entire galactic leadership to the brink of collapse. It was during this operation that the human soldiers found the ultimate weapon, a device capable of revealing the truth to the entire galaxy. But it came at a cost. Activating it would expose humanity's role in the war and bring the galaxy to the precipice of an uncertain future. The leaders of humanity's forces gathered for one final council. Some wanted to push forward with the device, to end the war and reveal everything to the galaxy. Others feared the chaos that would follow, how the other species would turn on humanity once the truth came out. Alara Wright stood before them, holding the device in her hands. She had been the one to uncover the conspiracy all those years ago, and now it was her choice to make. She could keep the truth hidden forever, allowing humanity to continue playing the role of villain, or she could expose everything and risk the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. With a deep breath, she made her decision. Ilara activated the device. The truth spread across the galaxy in an instant. Every sentient being, every species, saw the history as it truly was. Humanity had never started the war. It had been the Zarkovians, driven by fear and greed, who had manipulated the entire galaxy into conflict. The revelation was a shockwave that tore through the foundations of the galaxy's order. The CAS, once united, fractured into factions. The Zarkovians attempted to maintain control, but the truth had broken their grip on the galaxy. Humanity, now free from its role as the scapegoat, was finally able to rise, not as the villain, but as the champions of truth. In the aftermath, many species turned to humanity for leadership. Recognizing the strength and honor it had displayed throughout the war, the galaxy began to rebuild, not from the ashes of a lie, but from the foundations of truth. And as for humanity, they had won a war that no one knew they were fighting, not for their own glory, but for the freedom of the entire galaxy. The war had been a lie, but only humanity knew it. The war was a lie, but only humanity knew. HFY Sci-Fi Stories continued. In the aftermath of the revelation, the galaxy was in turmoil. Trust had been shattered, alliances broken, and the very fabric of the Coalition of Advanced Species, CAS, was torn asunder. The Zarkovians, once seen as the paragons of wisdom and power, were now exposed as the architects of a galaxy-spanning conspiracy. But the truth was only the beginning of humanity's challenges. Humanity had emerged victorious in the battle for truth, but victory came at a steep cost. The other species of the galaxy were not quick to forgive the deception that had been played upon them. Many of the once alliances were now tenuous, and suspicion ran deep. The reputation of humanity, tainted for so long as the galaxy's villain, now faced an uphill struggle for redemption. Some leaders saw humanity as a beacon of hope, the heroes who had dared to fight for truth at great personal cost. Others, however, feared that humanity's rise might signal the dawn of a new era of dominance, and they were not willing to let it happen. In the immediate aftermath, human diplomats worked tirelessly to negotiate new peace agreements, but the scars of war remained fresh. Many species, particularly the older, more powerful ones, such as the Rak and the Voltorians, had a deep mistrust of human motives. They couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's push for peace was simply a veil for their ambition to take over the galaxy. One of the most vocal opponents of humanity's new leadership was the Rak Prime Minister, Raksarath. The Rak, a reptilian species known for their cunning and military prowess, had long seen themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They had been manipulated by the Zarkovians just as much as humanity, but they refused to accept the loss of their standing. They feared that humanity, with its newfound power, might challenge their place at the top of the intergalactic hierarchy. Yet, despite the political friction, there were those who knew that humanity was the only species capable of leading the galaxy into a new era. Ilara Wright, now a revered hero of the galactic resistance, became humanity's figurehead. She addressed the fractured species in a historic speech broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. "I know the truth is hard to swallow," Ilara said, her voice resolute yet compassionate. "We fought for this galaxy, not to dominate, not to conquer, but to ensure that no species would ever again be manipulated or lied to. We fought because we believed in the potential of this galaxy to live in peace, to thrive without fear, to move beyond our past mistakes. Humanity doesn't seek to replace anyone, we seek to help. We want a galaxy where the truth is not a weapon, but a foundation for something better." Her words resonated with many. Species that had once feared humanity's rise now saw in their eyes something they had never noticed before, a genuine desire for cooperation, not conquest. The rebuilding of the galaxy began not with bloodshed, but with dialogue, with each species sitting at the table, working through their grievances. But there were still those who would not relent. Among the most radical of these factions was the Shadow Syndicate, an underground group of Zarkovian loyalists who had been working in the shadows to undermine the peace process. These radicals sought to reassert Zarkovian power, believing that their species' dominance was their birthright. They began to rally remnants of old Zarkovian military forces and mercenaries from across the galaxy, preparing for another war, one to reclaim what they saw as their empire's rightful throne. Humanity, however, was prepared for this. Ilara Wright and her allies had anticipated the rise of such resistance groups. While the galaxy's factions debated peace and recovery, humanity had quietly rebuilt its military strength, not out of fear, but out of necessity. They knew that the fight for truth would never truly be over. The first sign of the Syndicate's resurgence came when a fleet of Zarkovian ships, disguised as civilian vessels, made a bold move against a peaceful convoy of refugee ships carrying survivors from the war. The attack was brutal and swift, and the galaxy's fragile peace teetered on the edge of collapse. The Zarkovian radicals had made their first move. Humanity responded immediately. The Terran fleet, a now massive force that had fought on the front lines for years, was mobilized with unprecedented speed. Elara knew that this attack was not just an assault on a convoy, it was an assault on the fragile peace humanity had fought so hard to secure. The time for diplomacy was over. As the Terran fleet moved into position, Elara made a final appeal to the galaxy. "We do not seek war, but we will fight to protect the peace we have built. The Zarkovian Syndicate wants to destroy what we've worked for. They want to continue their lies, their manipulation, and we will not stand by while that happens. This is our galaxy, too. We will protect it." The battle that ensued was one of the largest ever seen in the galaxy. The Syndicate's forces, while numerous, were no match for the coordination and precision of the Terran fleet. The fight was fierce, but humanity's resolve, tempered by years of deception and conflict, gave them the strength to defeat the insurgent Zarkovian forces. The remnants of the Syndicate were scattered, and the galaxy's security was once again intact. The victory was bittersweet. Humanity had secured peace, but the scars of war would take time to heal. The galaxy had learned the hard way that peace was never a simple thing to maintain. It required vigilance, courage, and the unwavering determination to stand up for what was right. Humanity had proven not only that they could be heroes, but that they could also lead the galaxy into a new era of cooperation and understanding. Their greatest strength, however, was not their military might or their technological prowess. It was their willingness to face the truth, no matter how painful, and to fight for the future. And as the stars shone brightly over a newly united galaxy, humanity stood at the helm, not as conquerors, but as guardians of a future that was built on truth. The war had been a lie, but now, the truth had set them free. The war was a lie, but only humanity knew. HFY Sci-Fi Stories continued. As Elara Wright and her inner circle began their crusade against the eclipse, the galaxy once again found itself on the precipice of change. The clandestine order had its tendrils deeply woven into every corner of the galaxy's power structure. The Coalition of Advanced Species, CAS, the military fleets of the RAC, and even the largest financial conglomerates. To eradicate the eclipse was not just about defeating an enemy, it was about unraveling the very foundation on which the galaxy's political systems had been built. Elara's first move was to expose the eclipse in small, controlled strikes. She began by discreetly infiltrating high-security archives, where evidence of their manipulation over decades was stored. But it wasn't just about finding documents. The eclipse had already anticipated that humanity might seek to expose them. So their network was sophisticated enough to bury, alter, and obfuscate data. To counteract this, Elara's team developed a new type of tech, an encrypted data net that could bypass the most secure systems in the galaxy. Dubbed the Truth Weave, this technology was capable of decoding hidden truths, uncovering buried facts that the eclipse had manipulated over centuries. But to deploy it effectively, Elara would need access to the very core of the CAS central databases, an operation requiring not just human ingenuity, but trust from species who had once feared humanity's rise. Her first target was the RAC Prime Minister, Raxarath. Despite their previous animosity, Elara knew that Raxarath was a leader whose loyalty to his people was unwavering, and perhaps, just perhaps, he might see the threat posed by the eclipse as humanity did. Convincing him, however, would be no simple task. She summoned Raxarath to a secret meeting on the planet Myrmec, a neutral ground known for its secluded ancient ruins and its secrecy. When he arrived, he was flanked by his most trusted generals, his eyes narrow with suspicion. Why the secrecy, Elara? Why not just send a message through the usual channels? Raxarath's voice was low, cold. Do you intend to manipulate us once again? Elara looked him directly in the eye. The manipulation has always been theirs, Raxarath. The eclipse has been pulling the strings. controlling everything, the war, the peace, and now the balance of power. They've used both our species, and they're using yours now. Raxarath stiffened, a flicker of realization crossing his reptilian face. You speak of conspiracy, but you have no proof. I don't need to show you the proof, Ilara replied, tapping a button on her wristpad. The room's walls flickered with holograms, displaying the intricate webs of influence the eclipse had woven. I have something better than proof. I have the truth. Raxarath, it's right in front of you. The Rak Prime Minister stood silent for a long moment, the weight of the revelations hanging heavy in the air. You expect me to trust you? He said finally, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. After everything that has happened? I'm asking you to trust in something greater than all of us, Ilara responded, her voice steady. Trust that the future we fought for, all of us, wasn't a lie, and trust that you have the power to end this once and for all. Raxaratha's gaze remained fixed on the projections, his thoughts clearly racing. Finally, he nodded. I will help you, but this will not be without consequences. If we expose the eclipse and their actions, the entire galaxy will change, and not everyone will be pleased. Ilara smiled faintly. Then we'll make sure it changes for the better. With Raxaratha's agreement, humanity now had its first major ally in the fight against the eclipse. The next step was to reveal the truth to the rest of the galaxy, but they would need to do so in a way that would unite the fractured factions, not divide them further. The team worked quickly, using the Truth Weave to broadcast encrypted messages to the leaders of every major species in the galaxy, along with evidence and decrypted files from the highest levels of the galactic government. The revelation was set to be broadcasted across the galactic neural networks during the annual Galactic Summit, a meeting of the most powerful leaders in the galaxy. As the time for the broadcast drew near, Ilara found herself standing at the helm of a ship on the edge of a new frontier. The ship's comms were alive with updates from her team, preparing the broadcast, ensuring every piece of data was secure, coordinating the evacuation routes for anyone at risk of retaliation from the eclipse's remaining forces. The stakes were higher than ever. Raxarath, alongside other allied leaders, had promised their support, but Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that their enemies, the eclipse, would not go down without a fight. This would not be a battle fought with armies, but with the truth, and she knew the truth was a weapon more powerful than any fleet. The Galactic Summit was about to begin, and as the leaders took their seats in the Grand Hall, Ilara stood ready in the shadows, her hand poised over the final command to release the truth to the galaxy. The broadcast began. Across the galaxy, the leaders of every species watched in disbelief as the holographic projections of the eclipse's secretive web of influence and manipulation played out in full view. Files detailing covert operations, assassination plots, and countless subterfuge tactics unfolded in real time. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the architects of the lies were finally exposed for who they truly were. It wasn't just the leaders who saw the truth. The citizens of the galaxy, be they in bustling cityscapes on core worlds or the distant mining colonies, saw the dark hands that had shaped their realities for centuries. The revolution wasn't just political, it was societal. People everywhere now understood that the peace they had been living under was a fabricated illusion, constructed and controlled by the eclipse to keep them complacent. The repercussions were immediate. The remaining Zarkovian radicals attempted to launch a counteroffensive, but they were scattered and lost their strategic coherence. The members of the eclipse, both high-ranking officials and covert agents, were hunted down and brought to justice across the galaxy. But even with the fall of the conspirators, the galaxy faced a new challenge. The people were awakened, and many demanded change, real change, not just a shift of power from one corrupt faction to another. Ilara knew that this was the true test. The galaxy could either tear itself apart with infighting and mistrust, or it could rebuild itself into something truly greater, built on the lessons learned from the past. As the dust began to settle, Ilara stood once again before the gathered leaders of the galaxy. "This is our new beginning," she said, her voice firm but hopeful. "We have proven that we are not the villains of this story. We are the authors of our future." Humanity had risen from the depths of deception to become the beacon of truth in the galaxy. But now, they faced the greatest challenge of all, to rebuild the galaxy in a way that honored that truth and ensured that it would never again be manipulated. The war was a lie, but humanity had shown that no matter the cost. They would always fight to make the truth known, and in that truth, they would find their ultimate victory. The war was a lie, but only humanity knew. HFY Sci-Fi Stories continued. The galaxy was in the early days of its reconstruction, but the aftermath of the eclipse's fall left a galaxy that was still reeling from the shock of its own manipulation. The people, once divided by species, politics, and distrust, had all been united by one shared truth: they had been deceived. But now that the truth was out, there was a new, pressing question: what would come next? Ilara Wright, humanity's hero and the architect of the movement to expose the eclipse, now stood before a council that represented every major faction of the galaxy. The leaders of the Volturians, Rak, Andromedans, and even the skeptical Drakari were there, some warily eyeing humanity's representative, others hopeful that a new dawn had arrived. The Galactic Council had been reformed after the collapse of the old structure, and Ilara was now the head of a nascent government that had to balance the competing desires of all the species. The war was over, but the peace had not yet been secured. "I trust the message we all received was clear," Ilara began, her voice resonating in the Grand Hall. "The galaxy was manipulated, and we were used as pawns. Now, we are free to rebuild. But we must do so with a commitment to transparency and justice. We have the chance to create something new, something that will last." The hall was silent, and all eyes were on her. She could see the uncertainty in some of the leaders' faces, and it was clear that there was more at play here than just the desire to rebuild. "Are you suggesting that humanity should lead this new galaxy?" questioned Raxarath, the Rak Prime Minister, his sharp gaze cutting through the tension. "You ask for unity. But unity built on a single species leading the charge sounds like a dangerous precedent." "I'm not asking for leadership, Raxarath," Ilara said calmly, maintaining eye contact. "I'm asking for partnership. We all have a role to play in this new era, and that role will be defined by our willingness to work together, not dominate each other." The Drakari representative, a towering figure with glistening dark scales, spoke up next. "But trust is not something easily earned, Ilara Wright. Your people, humanity, are not without their own history of violence, of conflict. What makes you think this time will be different?" Ilara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "You're right. Humanity has a checkered past, but so does every species in this galaxy. We've all fought wars, manipulated each other, and fallen victim to those who would use us. What matters now is how we choose to move forward. We've learned that the only way to build a future is to dismantle the systems that allowed this cycle of manipulation and war to continue. No species, no matter how powerful, should hold the fate of others in their hands." The chamber was quiet, the leaders mulling over her words. It was clear that the scars of the past were deep, and the road to reconciliation was going to be fraught with challenges. But there was something undeniable in Ilara's conviction. She wasn't simply speaking as a leader of humanity. She was speaking as a leader for the galaxy, someone who had fought for the truth and understood the weight of the responsibility now resting on their collective shoulders. "You speak of partnership," Raxarath said slowly, his voice softer now. "But how do we know that? Once the dust settles, humanity will not seek to impose its will upon us all? How do we know that your people will not take advantage of the void left by the eclipse to secure your own dominance?" Ilara's answer came without hesitation. "I don't expect you to simply trust me. I expect you to hold us accountable, as we will hold every species accountable. There will be no more hidden agendas, no more lies. We will build a galaxy where transparency is the foundation of everything: our governments, our military, our alliances, and that transparency will only work if we all agree to it." The council hall buzzed with murmurs as leaders from various species debated quietly among themselves. After a long silence, the Valtorian representative, a stoic and regal individual, stood up. The Volturians had been one of the oldest and most powerful races in the galaxy, known for their wisdom and technological prowess, but also their arrogance. "I think," the Valtorian leader began, "that we have all been deceived for far too long. The galaxy has suffered because of lies. Perhaps it is time we consider what this new path means, not just for humanity, but for all of us. The question is not whether we trust humanity, it is whether we trust each other to build a better future." A ripple of agreement passed through the council. Ilara felt a wave of relief, but knew that this was only the beginning. The real work, the work of healing, rebuilding, and creating an equitable government was still ahead. The eclipse had been dismantled, but the real fight was for the soul of the galaxy. Humanity had proven it could stand against overwhelming odds and expose the truth. But now it would have to prove that it could lead with humility and fairness. As the meeting drew to a close, Ilara stood before the council once more. To move forward, she said, we must all agree on one thing. The future of the galaxy is not defined by who rules it, but by how we treat each other. And together, we must ensure that the truth remains the foundation upon which everything else is built. The leaders rose from their seats, some still wary, but others with a sense of cautious hope. The new council, a collaborative body of representatives from every species, was formed. No one species could hold sway over the others. This was the first step in rebuilding not just a galaxy, but a new way of governing. It was a slow, painful process, but it was a process that humanity would help lead, not through dominance, but through commitment to something greater. As the meeting adjourned, Ilara found herself alone for a brief moment in the chamber. The weight of what had been achieved, yet the enormity of what still lay ahead, pressed heavily on her shoulders. You did it, a familiar voice said from the shadows. Ilara turned to see her closest ally, Captain Lucian Harrow, stepping out of the shadows. The galaxy is watching. The truth is out. Now the real work begins. Ilara nodded, her expression somber yet determined. It's only just begun. Lucian, the peace we seek won't come from our speeches. It will come from our actions. And that's where we must be vigilant, because old habits die hard, and the galaxy will not change overnight. Lucian offered a small smile. We've fought for the truth. Now we fight for the future. Ilara smiled back. Yes, and we will not stop until the galaxy is truly free. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges were great, but humanity had already proven that they could face the hardest battles, and they had done so for a greater cause than personal gain. This time, they fought for the truth, and for the galaxy's future. The war had been a lie, but now, humanity would make sure that the truth would never again be concealed, and that was just the beginning. The war was a lie, but only humanity knew. HFY Sci-Fi Stories continued. Months passed since the formation of the new Galactic Council, and the process of rebuilding the galaxy was as arduous as it was uncertain. The exposed web of the eclipse had left deep scars, but the truth had set the stage for a new kind of galactic order, one based on transparency, mutual respect, and accountability. However, the enormity of this vision seemed overwhelming to many. Species had to learn how to trust again, and even those who had supported Ilara Wright and humanity's cause began to question whether such an idealistic system could ever truly work. Despite the initial strides made towards peace, the galaxy's political landscape was fragile. Old rivalries, centuries of mistrust, and deeply embedded power structures could not be undone overnight. As factions slowly found their footing within the new framework of governance, some species found themselves reluctant to relinquish the control they had held for so long. Others, particularly the more militant factions, continued to whisper of rebellion. But humanity, under Ilara's leadership, remained resolute. They had fought for the truth, for justice, and now they were determined to fight for the galaxy's future, one governed by fairness rather than fear. One of the first tests of the new government came unexpectedly from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a desolate cluster of planets known as the Forsaken Belt, a region that had once been a thriving hub of trade and cultural exchange. The Forsaken Belt had been reduced to ruins in the wake of the war, formerly under the control of the Eclipse. Its people had long suffered under the weight of oppression and exploitation. Now, they had an opportunity to rebuild, but deep-seated anger and the lure of vengeance threatened to derail the peace process. Ilara knew that the Forsaken Belt was not just a backwater region of the galaxy, it was a test of humanity's ability to inspire change, to offer hope, and to demonstrate that peace wasn't just a political agreement but a lasting commitment to every sentient being, no matter their past. A diplomatic envoy, led by Ilara herself, was dispatched to the Forsaken Belt. The mission was to negotiate with the planetary governors of the belt, including the infamous renegade warlord Korqr, a former Zarkovian general who had carved out a cruel empire in the wake of the war. Korqr was known for his brutal tactics, his inability to relinquish control, and his disdain for the new Galactic Council. Many feared that his resistance to peace would ignite yet another conflict. As Alara and her team arrived on the war-torn planet of Valterra, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The capital city had been reduced to rubble, and its inhabitants now lived in makeshift shelters, scrambling for food and resources. The remnants of Korkuar's army, once a formidable force, had dwindled into a collection of militias that barely held together. Yet, Korkuar's influence was still immense. He was a symbol of defiance, a beacon for those who refused to accept the new order. Alara's diplomatic envoy met Korkuar in a heavily fortified compound on the outskirts of Valterra. As she entered the meeting hall, her eyes scanned the room. The warlord sat at a long, dark table, flanked by his most trusted generals, each one scarred from battle, their faces hard with skepticism. Korkuar himself was a towering figure, his mechanical arm a reminder of the bloodshed he had orchestrated. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something in them, something like a spark of doubt, as if he too was beginning to question the path he had walked. "You've come to lecture me on peace, Alara, right?" Korkuar's voice was low and gravelly, a threat hanging in every syllable. "You think that just because you've exposed the eclipse, you can change the galaxy's course? My people have suffered because of your kind. You destroyed everything we had built." Alara didn't flinch. "I didn't come to lecture you, Korkuar. I came to offer something that can heal those wounds, a chance for your people to rebuild without fear of being manipulated by the shadows. We know that peace won't come easily, but if we don't try, we risk plunging the galaxy back into chaos." Korkuar laughed bitterly. "And why would I trust you? Humanity's own past is stained with blood. What makes you think you're any different from the others?" "Because we've learned from our mistakes," Alara replied. "We've faced the consequences of our actions, and now we're asking for the opportunity to prove we can do better. We're not asking for your loyalty, just your cooperation. The galaxy cannot heal if one piece of it is left to fester in hate." The room grew tense as Korkuar leaned back in his chair, considering her words. His gaze never left Alara's face, his expression unreadable. "You speak of cooperation," he said slowly, "but what guarantees do you offer? A signed document? A promise? You come here with no army, no force to back up your words. What if we choose to resist? What if we decide that we're better off on our own?" Alara's voice was calm, but there was strength behind it. "Then you will face the same choices the galaxy has faced before, wars without end, lies without resolution. But the truth is, you have a chance to build something new. This is your moment to choose a different path. You can either continue to live in the past, or you can embrace a future where your people can rise up, not through war, but through cooperation and partnership." Korkuar stood abruptly, his towering figure looming over the table, his mechanical hand clenched into a fist. The generals around him tensed, ready for violence at a moment's notice. But Alara didn't move. She stood firm, her eyes locked on his. "You have no idea what it's like," Korkuar muttered, his voice trembling with rage. "To lose everything, to watch your people die in front of you and be told it's for the greater good." "I do," Alara said softly, her gaze unwavering. "I do know what it's like, but I also know that continuing down the path of revenge only makes the wounds deeper. The galaxy doesn't need more bloodshed, it needs healing, and that healing starts with us." There was a long silence before Korkuar's voice, now tinged with exhaustion, broke the stillness. "And what do you propose?" Alara smiled, the first true sign of hope in the room. "I propose that we work together, Korkuar. Humanity has already begun to rebuild. We can help you do the same, but only if you choose to leave the past behind and build something better." The next few days were filled with tense negotiations, but slowly, despite Korkuar's resistance, a fragile agreement began to take shape. The Forsaken Belt would receive aid, its people would be granted the autonomy they had longed for, and Korkuar would step down from his position of power in exchange for a seat at the table, a voice in the new intergalactic coalition. The road to peace was still rocky, but the first step had been taken. As Alara left the negotiating table, Captain Lucian Harrow approached her, a mixture of relief and wariness in his eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. "You convinced him to see reason." Alara nodded, but there was no joy in her expression. "It's just the beginning, Lucian. There are many more like Korkuar out there, those who are still clinging to the past. But if we're going to build a future, we have to be willing to face them, one by one." "Do you think it will ever truly be different?" Lucian asked, his voice soft, thoughtful. Ilara's gaze turned to the horizon, where the ruins of Valterra still smoldered faintly under the twin suns. I don't know, but I believe in the truth, Lucian, and as long as we continue to fight for it, there's hope. Hope was a fragile thing, Ilara knew, but it was something worth fighting for. And that fight had only just begun.